Welcome. This video introduces lists in BYOB. Pretty much every programming language has some notion of a collection of information. A list or an array, they're often called. And in BYOB, the form this takes is a special kind of variable. So we've got the normal make a variable, and then we have make a list. So if I make a list, I'm asked to give it a name. I'm going to call this scores. And scores starts empty. And I can add things to it with a little plus here. And so right now there's 4 things in my list, and I can resize it so I can see them all. Let's put some values in. So if I click on the first item in scores, I could say, okay, the first score was a 16. And if I hit enter, it actually inserts a new one for me. I just want my 4, so I'm going to get rid of this one by hitting delete. And then we'll say the second score is 18. And then if I hit tab, it takes me to the next one. And then I'll hit tab again and put in, let's put in another 16. So right now, scores is a list. It has 4 things. I can see the length down there. And there are various operations built in for handling lists. So I can say, what is the length of scores? And I'm told that it's 4 items long. And if I add another score to it, so let's put 15 at the end and ask for length of scores, I get 5. I can ask, what is item 1 of scores? Well, it's 16. Or what is item number, let's type in 3 of scores. Well, that's going to be this one. So sure enough, I get 19. And I can ask for the last one, which would be 15. Now that's kind of a shortcut. It's a handy thing to have. But another way I could say that is give me item, well, I know the last one, if there's 5 things in this list, then the last one is number 5. So I could write that same thing as this. Figure out the length of scores, well that's 5, and then give me item number 5 of scores, and I get 15. But rather than having to do that, it's nice to be able to say, give me the last one. Any just picks a random one. So each time I click this, I'm likely to get a different value. Not quite as handy as first, last, or being able to specify a particular index. I want the 4th thing. There are also some blocks we can use to modify a list. So I could say, I want to add the number 12 to scores. And it appears right at the end. I want to delete, and similar to the item blank of scores, I can say I want to delete the first or the last or all, so I'm going to delete the last. I can say insert, so if I actually want to force something to go in, if I want to insert 10 at location, let's insert it at location 2. So here's my list right now, 16, 18, 19, 16, 15. If I insert 10 at location 2, it shoves it right in there and pushes everyone else down. So now my list actually has 6 things. And I can replace a value. So if I want to change that 10, I could say replace item number 2, because that's its location, of scores with, and let's change that to 15. And there we go. There is no magic kind of set the list to be this block. You may notice there is this. So the list block here, I can use this to specify a list literal. So I could make a list that has, I don't know, 2, 5, and 3. And I can use it to do some things. If I ask for the length of that list, it'll tell me it's 3. If I ask for the first thing in that list, it'll tell me 2. But I can't use this list block to say delete the last thing of this list. It just doesn't work because I'm not working with a list variable where I've got it kind of permanently stored. This is really just a make me a temporary list, and so it's not going to be terribly useful to us. You shouldn't be using that one a whole lot. If I want to make, if I'm doing a bunch of stuff and playing with a list, and deleting stuff and adding stuff, and I want to be able to get back to my original list. Probably the easiest way is to just make a little script that looks like delete everything, and then add back in some stuff that you care about. So I can't remember exactly what my list looked like to begin with, but we'll add 16, 18, 19, and another 16. So anytime I click this block, it's going to reset my scores list, which is kind of handy. Now we can build blocks that work with a list. So I'm going to make a block, and I'm going to put it in the list category, so it appears down here and it has that red color. And I'm going to call this block swap. And the goal is going to be to take in two values, like two locations, 1 and 3, and swap the two values that are at those locations. So I'm just going to call it swap for now, and then I'll go put in parameters. This is not going to give me back an answer, it's just going to do something. So I'm going to make it a command block and hit OK. So swap, I need to add some parameters. Swap. And so now I've got to come up with some names. Let's call this first input location 1. And what I expect this location to be is a number. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to be a number. Don't have to do that, but I'll try and be neat. So swap location 1. And that's a plain word. And then another input, location 2. And this one also I expect to be a number. And that's just a plain word. And then finally, my list. And so here I just want to come up with a name for the thing. I'm just going to call it list as my generic name for whatever list I happen to be working with. And the type of information I want here is a list. Once again, I don't have to do that, but doing that will make sure that it's real clear when I look at my block what it's supposed to take. So before we try and actually write the swap, I want to verify that what we're getting in the parameters, we kind of understand how this is working. So I cheated. I created a block of 5 says. He's going to say swapping, and then I'll have him say location 1 and location 2 in list. So I just want to see what he's getting. I'm going to hit OK here. If I make a call and say something like swap 1 and 3 in, and because I set this to only accept lists, I can see it wants a list in scores. So if I run this, he says swapping location 1 and location 3 in this thing, and he knows he's working with scores. So in this block, anytime we say list, we're going to be talking about this particular list because that's the one I placed as the input. Now, the advantage of doing it this way is I can use this same block to work with any list. If I have some other list, let's call this letters, and I could in my letters list have maybe A, P, P, L, E. I can use that list and pass it into this same function, and now when we say list inside this block, we'll be talking about letters and not scores. I'm going to get rid of the other stuff here and just have him say which list he thinks he's working with. He knows, oh, I'm working with the letters list. If I switch it to scores, he knows he's working with that list. So now we can worry about how we're actually going to do the swap. So say I want to swap items 1 and 3 in this list. I can't just copy what's in 19, or what's in 3, this 19, to that location, or I'm going to wipe out the 16 and then I won't know what to put here. What I'm going to need to do is have a temporary variable. So I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to call it temp. And this is where I'm going to do something like take the first one, store it there. Then I can copy number 3 over to 1 safely and wipe it out because I've got a copy of what 1 was and move it here. Right, so I'm going to kind of work out the process before I try and build it in the swap block just by hand. All right, so here's my list. The process is going to be set temp to item 1 of whatever I'm working with my scores list. Oops. And let's just go ahead and do it this way. And then it's okay to change item 1. So I'm going to replace item 1 of my scores list with item 3 of my scores list. And so we don't have a 3, so I'll type that in. Okay, so that says take what's in item 3 and copy it into item 1. And now I can worry about replacing what's in item 3 with the value that we've got stored in temp. So we'll say replace item 3 of scores with temp. So I'm going to run this kind of one step at a time so we can watch it happen. So first we're going to take the 16 and copy it to temp. Now it's safe to move the 19 to over the top of the 16. And so we copy from 3 to 1. And finally, now it's safe to replace item 3 with what used to be in item 1, that's 16. All right, so I've reversed the 19 and the 16, I've made them swap places. If I put them back together and run this all at once, they should swap back and I should get back to 16 first and then 19 in the third spot. And you can see that's exactly what happened. We copied the 19 out, copied the 16 to here, and then the 19 back to there. So now I feel like I'm ready to build the generic version of this. So let's go edit the block. And I don't need to say anything. So we're going to set temp. Now the one thing to be careful of is when you're kind of working out here and you move something in here to make sure that it still makes sense. Now I don't always want to use item number 1 of scores. Right? That really what I want to make a generic version of this, I want that to just say location 1. So I'm going to move location 1 of scores, of whatever that is. And now wait, I'm not always going to use scores. Right? Sometimes I might want to use letters, sometimes scores. I don't want to have a particular list picked here. So I'm going to use this parameter, this generic word list. That'll mean whatever list I happen to be working on. So now the second line, replace item. Well, same thing. What I'm really trying to say there is the first location of, well, it's not always going to be scores. It's going to be whatever list I'm trying to work with item, it's not always going to be 3. Really what I'm saying here is the second location of, it's not always going to be scores, it's going to be whatever list I'm working with. And then the last line, same idea. 3, well, really that's location 2 of whatever list I'm working with temp. Alright, so let's try this out. I'm going to swap 1 and 3 in scores. And here we can actually clear out temp just so we see that something happened. So this should switch our 16 and our 19. Sure enough, it does. I could try swapping, just to make sure this is really working, let's try swapping 2 with 1. And so that should swap the 18 and the 19. And it does. If it's not working right and I kind of want to see what's going on, well, probably the best thing to do is put some say blocks in and just try stuff out. So I'm going to do this, and if I'm not sure that location 1 of list is doing the right thing, maybe I'll have him say that. Or maybe I'm not sure temp is getting set right. Maybe I'd at that point have him say, okay, I tried to change temp, what is it now? And then I get to this place and I'd say, okay, I tried to replace item location 1 of list, so let me have him say that. Or even let me have him say the whole list that we're working with, so that I can see what's going on. So with that version, he says, okay, 19 is what temp is. I copied the 18 there, and now we copy the 19 over. So we can actually watch kind of what's happening. And if after every step I put one of those say the list, I can actually kind of see what he's doing at any stage. Oops, so let's rip this out. So we're starting with 19 and 18. We expect to get them switched. We copy to temp. We update the 19, and then we copy the 18 over. All right, one last bit of cleanup before I close this project down. I want to make sure I can get this swap block into future projects. I know it's going to be kind of handy for some other stuff we're going to do. So I'm going to start by just kind of cleaning up my mess. All right, get rid of all this stuff because I don't necessarily want to see it next time I do something. And I can even get rid of my variables. So both of my lists and my temp, and just go ahead and delete all those and get this down to just really what I care about, and that's the fact that I've got this swap block built. So if I save this, and so I'm going to save it to the desktop, swap block, and hit OK. Now let's say I start working on a new project, and this one doesn't have the swap block. What I can do is I can import a project and go back to the desktop to the same location and find my swap block, and brings it in, and now I've got that same block. It actually brings in all the stuff, so I get my sprite from the original project as well, which I don't need both of those, so I can get rid of one of them. But that's how I can get a block that I've created in another project into the current project.